if you're like a lot of people in Western Hemisphere, the minute you get a headache or got a little ache, been at the gym, working out, we've been taught pre-medicate with ibuprofen, take a little ibuprofen. But what we found through the years is that a little bit of ibuprofen, a little bit of Tylenol is doing more to your body than just minimizing the pain a little bit. And so there was a study early in, let me get it for you. There was a study early in 2018 that really looked at ibuprofen. And since this time, other studies have come back and said ibuprofen is no trouble to gentlemen, so on and so forth. But I want to show you two studies that really supports the concept that chronic use of ibuprofen and Tylenol and other anti-inflammatories can be associated with erectile dysfunction, but also studies that have looked at whether or not ibuprofen use can blunt the body's ability to make testosterone, right? So here we are in this space where we know that in order to really optimize men's health, not just erectile health, but heart health, diabetes, cancer protection, depression, that optimizing testosterone is so important. If we can find that a common drug that we're taking every now and then might be reducing that, I think it makes sense that we would try to find alternatives. So the first study I want to share with you is this one. Now, this study looks at regular NSAID drug use for erectile dysfunction. Now, this one is a little older. This was 2018 where this study was done. And so what they kind of looked at, it was a prospective cohort study. So this is basically kind of looking at the information that they had collected, and they were looking at guys who were between the age of 45 and 69 years old, and they started in 2002. And what they did is looked at whether or not erectile dysfunction was prevalent within this group. And what they found is over the 80,000 guys in the study, almost half of them were considered NSAID users. Now, that's a lot, right? They were considered people who were using NSAIDs, and that's the ibuprofen types of drugs, regularly. And based off of those guys who were using them, about 29% of them reported either moderate or severe erectile dysfunction. Now, taking it one step further, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug use and ED was strongly correlated with age, with regular drug use, and it increased from almost 35% to almost 50% in men who were 60 to 69 years old and had ED. Now, this is not saying this caused it. I do want to let you know that this isn't a causative study here. This is basically showing that there was a strong association between the two. And if you remember from when I interviewed Dr. Shirley, who is an expert on nitric oxide production, one of the things that she reminded us is that NSAIDs actually are associated with debilitating the enzyme that we need to make nitric oxide, which we need to make the blood vessels expand so that blood pressure can reduce and so that blood flow can surge wherever we want it to be, right? So keeping that in mind, I wanted to share that with you. Now, this was another great study that kind of came up that looked at how ibuprofen was altering human testicular physiology, right? To produce a state of hypogonadism. What hypogonadism means is basically that the gonads or the testicles kind of stopped doing what we wanted them to do in this study. And it kind of goes through, so this is a great study to kind of look at, but it kind of goes through and it talks about why we're seeing this impact. And what we feel like is happening is that it's altering that LH or that luteinizing hormone surge that's supposed to happen to increase the release and the production of testosterone. So I think it's really important that we keep in mind that when we're talking about ibuprofen, that it's not as simple as just popping an Advil because we have aches and pains, that we do want to come up with some other ways to potentially deal with the problem other than simply just popping a pill, so to speak. So let's talk about some other things that we can do. Now, mind you, the things that we're going to talk about here are more of around the space of herbal supplements, alternative theory, alternative healing methods. And what you got to know is that everybody is different and that what may work for you may not work for somebody else. So one of my favorites, and my dad could take it, but my mom can't. She says it messes with her stomach or whatever. She can't take anything. Everything messes with her stomach. But it's something called Boswellia. 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 And Boswellia is another name for like Indian frankincense. And what Boswellia, we got really great data and we got good anecdotal evidence that 600 milligrams of Boswellia in some people can mimic the effects of ibuprofen. Because oftentimes when you're taking ibuprofen, it's about 600 milligrams when you're really hurting. So the thing about using Boswellia or some of the other natural remedies for pain management is that they do tend to take a little longer to work. So like, for instance, with Boswellia, you would take a loading dose, you would take a little every day. And then on the days where you hurt, you might try to increase Boswellia that way, right? Another thing is that there are a lot of anti-inflammatory things that you can do, like ginger, like turmeric. But the thing about those is that they don't work for everybody. And not only that, some people tend to be sensitive to them. You might get them and be like, you know what, I feel like I'm itching, or so on and so forth. So it kind of becomes a space where you have to kind of figure out what works for you. Another thing that we forget about is good old-fashioned ice and good old-fashioned heat. Now, for those of you who have arthritis, what you'll notice is that a lot of times the cold seems to aggravate it. If you're a person where cold seems to aggravate, get a good old-fashioned hot water bottle, not a heating pad, unless the heating pad has some type of moisture in it. Because what happens when you plug in a heating pad and put it on a sore back or a sore knee is that heating pad dehydrates the tissue because it's electric and it's just heat. It's just pulling the water out of the tissues that we need to keep the tissues happy, right? So what you want to do is good old-fashioned hot water bottles or a hot compress has moisture in it. Even putting rice in a sock and microwaving the sock, even that has a little bit of moisture in it. I prefer that over a heating pad because otherwise we're depleting the muscles of moisture. So you put a hot pack on the area. The problem with these remedies that we're talking about is that they require more effort. And sometimes it's so much easier to just take an Advil because we know they're going to work, right? But they're also going to work on other parts of our body. So if there's ways that we can get around it and ways we can minimize it, then why not? Right? Another piece is swelling. So you've been on your feet all day and you get home and your feet hurt. One of the first things that you might want to do is take a Tylenol or ibuprofen. What you can actually do is fill a big old tub with ice water and just put your feet down in that ice water and you will be surprised. Okay, the first couple minutes you're like, oh my goodness, this hurts. I can't do it. If you leave it in there for long enough, of course, not long enough so you can get frostbite. Leave it in there for 5 or 10 minutes and take it out, get some reprieve, and go back. What you'll notice is the next day, ice is nature's biggest anti-inflammatory. And we kind of forget it exists because it takes a lot of energy to get ice out and to put it on the thing and ice my knee at the end of the day. So really kind of deciding what type of pain is it? Is it pain that's more responsive to heat, or is it pain that's more responsive to ice, and kind of setting up your environment so you're ready for it? If your ice maker is out, you're not ready to use ice. If you don't have a hot water bottle or anything to use heat with, then you can't use this heat remedy. So figure out where you find more soothing and try it. You'd be surprised at the level of impact that something as simple as ice or heat can have at the end of a long day that can actually carry you into the morning time. So one thing, of course, Boswellia isn't going to be as strong as ibuprofen is, but once your body gets kind of accustomed to using it and you can minimize pain in these other ways too, sometimes it works symbiotically. Now, another thing I want you to keep in mind, and I know we have ladies listening and we have some gents listening too, is that our hormones being balanced has a lot to do with the perception of the pain. I want to say that again. Your hormones being balanced and optimized has a lot to do with the perception of pain. And what I mean by that is if your testosterone is low, everything seems to hurt more. You're like, well, damn, I don't know. My back wasn't hurting last year, it just started hurting. Well, that may be because your testosterone levels are lower this year than they were last year. And study after study shows us that if we help guys optimize testosterone, or they get their testosterone levels up and everything is balanced, they don't perceive pain as much. And it makes sense, right? You know, like you think about it, when you're complaining that you ache, you're complaining about anything, you know, there's a term we use like it's bitchy, you know, you bitch, you know, like you're complaining, right? And actually, when we think about the definition of the word bitch, it actually means a female dog. And what female dogs have are estrogen, female hormones, right? So when guys are in a situation where the female hormones are higher than they should be in their body and their male hormones are lower than they should be in their body, they actually become a little bitchy, right? And we call that andropause. You know, women have menopause, guys have andropause because their androgens or their male hormones have stopped being optimized, right? So one of the main things that anybody with chronic pain should have is a hormone evaluation to see whether or not, as a lady, your estrogen and testosterone is where it is, and as a guy, that your testosterone levels are up and your estrogen levels are down. A lot of you send me your testosterone levels and you're like, Doc, what do you think? Well, listen, the estrogen levels are just as important. If your estrogen levels are sky high, guys have a tendency to feel emotional. They feel like, like the world is caving in on them. They might feel a little depressed. They might, have a little bit of brain fog because your body as a male typically is optimized to have higher levels of testosterone and lower levels of estrogen. So you want to keep those estrogen levels as low as possible, those testosterone levels elevated so that the perception of pain is not as difficult. And it's the same with women. If our hormones are thrown off, we ache more. And it's not that, your body is breaking down because you hit 50 all of a sudden. Your body is more sensitive to the tiny levels of pain than it was before. So always, always, always make sure that you're getting your testosterone levels checked, but also your estrogen levels, also your thyroid hormone levels, because all of those will impact the way your body experiences pain. Yes! Awesome.